Very excited this week to welcome back a familiar face on Matchpoint Canada. She's a four-time WTA title holder, reached a career high of number 21 in the rankings, Canadian Olympian on top of all of that. And her final season, which I'm eager to talk to her about, was back in 2021. Pretty recent, and it was her best on tour, winning a WTA 1000 event in Italy, making the quarterfinals of the Aussie Open, and then playing what turned out to be the final tournament of her career at the WTA finals as well at the end of that season. Sharon Fichman, great to see you. Thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I am dusting off my podcasting equipment. I haven't touched it in a couple weeks. I was taking a little vacation and letting my co-host Ben Lewis take things. So this is me now trying to catch up to him. And I thought, who better to have on than someone who just feels like having a casual conversation about the sport we love. And it's really great to see you again.
Thank you. Stop it. Keep it coming.
How,
I will
how,
take all the flattery. Appreciate it.
how the heck have you been now? Like, since we last spoke, you've made it official that you've retired from active playing. And that decision obviously lingered for a while. So maybe you can walk us through, how you finally came to that eventual choice and how you're feeling now in the next phase of your involvement with the sport.
Yeah. So how did I get to that decision? My body just wasn't able to get to the point that I needed it to get to in order to compete at a high level. That's just full stop. Really, if I could sum it up, it was that. Um, but I still love tennis and I definitely want to be involved. I love coaching and I find it so rewarding, very therapeutic, actually. So it just sort of feels like a no brainer to stay in tennis in that respect. And I'm really grateful that I get to work with Tennis Canada and that they have me on board. I'm learning a lot. I get to work with incredible people. I get to work with incredible players. So I truly just been such a blessing. And honestly, at the end of most days, I think to myself, like, I can't believe this is my job. Like it's just, the time just flies. So I'm really grateful. It's definitely been quite the transition. I think that, it's a big part of it is just accepting that, things unfolded the way they did. I think there's a part of me that knows that most of the time it's not a fairy tale ending. For the most part, professional athletes finish their career, I would say, on the way out in that sense. And you're not usually at the top of the game and ranked as high as you ever were because, if you are, you're going to keep playing. It's usually injuries or something that slowly starts to take you away from the game, or at least make you have to kind of compromise your level, so to speak. So I think realistically, I understand that, but I guess it's interesting that it that my last event was the year-end finals, and I didn't even know it. In hindsight, looking back, I thought, okay, I'll just manage my injuries and I'll be back in a few months, and a few months turned into a few years, and then I realized, you know what, I just don't think it's going to happen. So realistically, it's time to move on. But I'm enjoying it, and I'm somewhat of a pathological optimist, and I think that at some point, you just need to look forward, and there's so much more life to live. And as a professional athlete, I'd say as a professional tennis player, because it depends on the sport, I always knew that there was more years in front of me than behind me whenever I was going to retire. So mentally, I think I was prepared for that, and I think I did a pretty good job of at least, having some things to go to when that transition happened.
Well, it's pretty phenomenal, I think, to be able to say that the last tournament you ever played professionally was the biggest one out there in the sense that it's reserved for the top 8 doubles teams in the world. Like, I don't even know if any professional tennis players ever ended their career at that event?
Well, I've actually never thought of it that way. So that does sound pretty cool. I'll take that. Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the research staff at Matchpoint Canada confirm that, of course, but I just wonder, right? Like, it's interesting because if you're playing in that tournament, it means you're one of the best teams and best doubles players out there. Most would be continuing, but unfortunately for you, it was the shoulder. I think was that it that.
Yeah, it was the shoulder. I was battling that shoulder all year. It's crazy because I actually think, if I think back, I actually only competed maybe 5 months in that entire season and finished, I think, 22nd or 21st, maybe at the year end. So I think to myself, gosh, if I was able to be healthier for a little longer or the whole season, I wonder,
Imagine.
I wonder. what I would have been able to achieve ranking wise. But it was the shoulder initially, and then just through, uh, I'm going to say bad decisions. In hindsight, looking back, I would have definitely done things differently with certain decisions that I made for my health and my rehab and recovery. But hindsight's always 2020. So that's sort of what happened. It started with the shoulder, and then it led to other things, compensation and all that stuff. So
Right.
yeah.
How proud are you of that season though? Because my goodness, I mean, it's the first time you made the quarters of a slam. You won a WTA 1000 tournament, which is the next level of huge events out there, and qualified for that year-ending tournament, as you said, only playing for not even maybe half the season.
Yeah, and I made the Olympics, which was the reason I came back, which was really special. I'm very proud of this season. In hindsight, I'm very proud of it. I think in the moment, I could have enjoyed it a lot more. That's usually the case, I would say, when I talk to other athletes, is I just wish I enjoyed it more. I wish I enjoyed the journey more. But I'm very proud of it. I would have done things differently, but all things considered and everything that I was faced with and all the adversity that I had to deal with, I think I did a really great job with the resources I had and who I was at the time. So lots of positives, and I think for my soul, I choose to focus on that the most.
That's great. I mean, we were thrilled for you, obviously, because we'd known you for so many years, and you had already taken a break from tennis and kind of come back to it. It was like your second crack at it, and you were just having, living your best life out there as a tennis player on tour, and so it was so nice to see. Does the fact that you had stepped away from the game before make it a little bit easier now to transition? You already had, so many things in place, like the broadcasting, tennis analysis that you had done, and things like that.
Yeah, actually, I accidentally sort of paved a good way to transition from from pro tennis to life after pro tennis, unintentionally for sure. But it was that break that really set me up to be able to sort of transition seamlessly. I'd done my certifications in the break that I had taken, and at the time, I thought I was really done. I'd retired, so I got my Coach 3 certifications. I'd already gotten reps doing broadcasting and commentating with Sportsnet. So I had that rapport, which was really good. And I built the relationships with many of the coaches and staff at Tennis Canada. Also had been working at the Granite Club at the same time too. So I had some connections in the local community. So I felt like when it was time to transition and I made that final decision because I'm not coming back for a third time, yeah, I felt like it wasn't as much resistance, and I wasn't as, how should I say? I wasn't as confused or, searching in a way with what I wanted to do. I didn't have to find myself. I knew that I love the sport and I wanna stay in the sport, whether that's through coaching or, TV. I really think that tennis brings me a lot of joy, and it's where I really want to be spending most of my time.
We'd love to hear that, and obviously enjoy the Billie Jean King Cup and Davis Cup and any international competitions where we saw you, behind the microphone. Is it going to be a struggle to maintain that with the coaching? Are you going full coaching now, or are you hoping to kind of keep your hand in both of those aspects of the sport?
Um, Knowing myself, I'd like to keep my hand in both. I don't think that they have to be. I don't think it has to be so binary. I truly feel that commentating and broadcasting has made me a better coach, and I think that coaching has made me a better broadcaster slash commentator. I think that both things give me different perspectives, and I learn a lot, and I feel that I'm more valuable in both of those roles because of each other. So my hope is that I can do both. They both bring me a lot of joy and fulfillment. So if there's a way to keep doing both things, I'll definitely try my best to do that.
Well, there's plenty of your contemporaries that have been successful kind of juggling both at the same time, from Pam Shriver to Darren Cahill, Brad Gilbert. I mean, the list goes on and on. So why not add a Canadian voice to that as well? Who are you working with these days? A particular player or kind of a crew of young Canadian emerging tennis players? What's the focus for you?
Good question. So I'm at the regional training center in Toronto at Sobeys Stadium a few days a week, at least 3 days a week, sometimes more. It's looking like it's going to start to be. It started to be more already. This start of 2025, which I'm really enjoying. And look, there's a lot of good young players. We've got a good group. I'd say in total now it's about 15 to 17 players that come in throughout the week that we work with in groups there. Myself and a couple of other coaches and strength coaches. And individually, I've been working with a couple of good players. I mean, they're all great. So it's not to say that some aren't, but two really good, young, promising up and coming players I'm working with a little more individually is their names are Tessa Puente. So she's one of our top U14 girls, and Dennis Karabulu, who's one of our top U14 boys. So it's been a pleasure to work with them a little bit more one-on-one as well as groups. And then in terms of who I'm working with when I'm doing tours and whatnot, I'd say that I'm more of a supplementary coach in that way. I feel at Tennis Canada, it's very much like a family, and we've got a handful of coaches that really just give their whole life to trying to develop players and make tennis in Canada better. And we were pulled in a lot of directions, and the good part is it's because we have a lot of success at the junior level and also at the pro level. So sometimes, coaches have to fly over here or over there. So we sometimes have to cover each other's bases, if that makes sense. So there's times where, on the tours, I might be working with a player that normally works with another coach. So we have to tag team in that way. So, I look forward to being able to do that and collaborate. I learn a lot from being able to work with those coaches, and there's a number of good, promising players up the pipeline for sure. And recently, we've had the players like Vicky Mboko, who's doing super well, Kayla Cross, who's doing really well as well, a number of other players, but coming into Toronto and training and at times I've had to jump in and be a supplementary coach for that. And I know I've known the girls since they were kids, so it's really nostalgic to be on court with them. So for the most part, I feel like I play a role in a lot of different players' lives, some more so than others. But for the most part, I'd say those two that I named, I'm spending the most time with individually. But there's a big group that are really, really great kids.
Well, what a fantastic resource you must be for those kids with all that you've been through and achieved in your career. So that's fantastic for them to get to work with someone who's legitimately done it all, at the highest level. And they grow up quick, eh? Like you're working with those U14 kids, but before you know it, they're going to be the age of like Kayla and Vicky, who are now, 18, 19, 20. And then even the players that most Canadian like hardcore tennis or sorry, casual tennis fans would know, like Dennis and Felix and Layla Annie. I mean, they're still all in their mid to early 20s as well. But it's nice to hear that there's a crew that's coming up because Canadian tennis fans want to know that there's like succession planning, for lack of a better term, I guess. And are you feeling pretty confident that we've got the types of players that can have a career like Dennis, Felix, Bianca, and Layla Annie eventually?
Look, I think that we have been developing more and more players over the years, and I think the results speak for themselves. In the last handful of years, we were both Davis Cup champions and Billie Jean King Cup champions, and Tennis Canada's constantly, trying to implement new ways to support the current players and to help develop more players, and just get rackets in more kids' hands so that we have more people playing tennis in general and coming through the pipeline. So, I think sometimes these things come in waves, but from what I'm seeing right now, we've got a lot of kids that are loving tennis and working super hard. And I think at this age, it's tough to say, okay, this one's going to make it. I think at any age, it really is, but it's tough to say that. But from what I see, I think we have a lot of promise. And I really think also it's showing that if you take a look at, who's coming through the pipeline after Layla Annie Fernandez, who is kind of coming across as a veteran, but she's really in her early
She
mid.
even 24 yet? I don't even think so, right?
I know it's wild. But we have Vicky Mboko, who won her first round at a Masters 1000 this week in Miami. She's been playing incredible. I mean, I think she had one of the longest match winning streaks. Certainly for a teenager, and I'm sure you can whip out other stats, but I believe she won 17 matches in a row or something Crazy. Don't quote me on
Yeah, I
that.
think it was even more than that. It was 20 something. We had her on
20
recently, and she's well,
something.
had 5 ITF titles already this season. So
Yeah, no, she's been absolutely crushing it. So we have that to really look forward to. And you can see that as long as she stays healthy, I think she's got a lot of promise. Kayla Cross, who I think I talked to you about her before, like years and years ago. I feel like if you go through those old podcasts, I'm sure that her name popped up, but I've always believed in her. I think she's got a ton of potential. She's a great kid, super good athlete, very fun to watch, lefty with a lot of tools and resources in her game.
great
Um,
doubles player too.
Great doubles player. So she's really just a great all around athlete, tennis player in person. So I'm glad to see that she's getting the success that she so rightfully deserves. We've also got Cadence Brace, who's been climbing up the ranks. She's at LSU with Kayla. But like steadily, improving and winning more and more matches. We got Carson Branstein, who also went the college route and has
You're
been.
you're rhyming off all the names I've got on my list here that I wanted to bring up. So this is perfect.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
No,
Yeah.
it's I think if you really take a look at where we are, especially on the women's side, I think it's really exciting. I mean, these players are so young and they've got hopefully like at least a decade more of tennis under their belt. So, if this is where they are now, as long as they stay healthy, I think that there's a lot of exciting things that we can hopefully look forward to.
I want to talk about Vicky Mboko a little bit more because I remember watching her here in Toronto a couple years ago when she was given what was it, a qualifying wild card, I think, and just so impressed with the serve and the poise. And she was only like 15 years old at the time. Now she's 18. She's kind of been off the radar a little bit the past couple years. I feel like she was playing a lot of events over in Europe and kind of maybe pulled away from the Tennis Canada bubble for a little while, but now seems to be back in the fold again. And here she is pushing like a top 10 player like Paula Badosa to a third set tiebreak. I mean, how incredible that was. Um, how is it that all of a sudden this is just clicking for her, or is this a player that you would have said even previously, hey, keep an eye on her, she's something special?
I would have said previously, keep an eye on her. She's something special. The biggest thing with Vicky is that she's just really needed to stay healthy. I mean, she's young, but she's been plagued with a bunch of injuries in the last handful of years. So that has really put, the brakes on how quickly she could rise for a little while. She was in this like stop start pattern so often. So now, the biggest focus is for her to stay healthy. That's 100% what her team's prioritizing. And you're right. She was in Europe for a good year. She was working with Justine Hennon's old coach, Lena's old coach. And um, she definitely isn't naturally a clay court player, is what she would say. But, I think that her being over there, she developed a lot of skills, having to adapt and just be on clay more. Every player I shouldn't say every player. Most players have a preferred surface. So I think that, she'll always love hard courts and indoor hard courts. She's a Canadian. And what can you say? You can't take the Canadian out of the player. But I think that being on clay more has added some more variety to her game, and she's definitely learned. So I think that now that she's back on home soil and working with the team that really played a huge part in her development in the first place, there's like that sense of comfort. She's able to sleep in her own bed more, being home, which is a huge thing, especially at a young age. So important to be around your family and just feel that familiarity of being in your own home. So that's definitely helped mentally for her. And then I think just, adding those tools that she acquired from being in Europe more and adding that to how she's playing in her indoor environment and everything. I think that's really been a huge part of why she's been so successful lately as well. So combining her just being healthy now and having such a great team and support and everything, I think that actually all that adversity has helped her get to the point where she is now. Even though she's so young, it's crazy to think what she's gone through at this point. But if she stays healthy, I think that there's going to be a lot of exciting things for us to see and cheer for.
It sure seems like it. With all these names you mentioned, is it tough for these young players to sort of navigate this development process in terms of knowing what the right path is to take? Because you've got obviously the Federation Tennis Canada, who's got a limited amount of funding that they can put towards all these players. They can't give it to everyone who comes knocking. And then you've got coaches, outside coaches that probably want to get attach themselves with some of these talents as well as they're coming out. I know, like, Kayla Cross, for example, she was pretty open with us about taking a little time away from Tennis Canada. Now, recently, she's playing college tennis, but also seems to be back in the mix of athletes that Tennis Canada is sort of on board with again. Just how this process is for these young players to know what the right decisions are to make at this age.
That's a great question. I think that's the question that every parent asks. At least me, I get that question a lot. And I mean, I always say it's really tough. I can only imagine how tough it is for a parent because there's no manual. Is I can't just hand you a textbook or a roadmap like, hey, just do this and your kid's gonna make it or everything's gonna be fine. But one thing I will say is, in my experience, the coaches at Tennis Canada, they care so much. And we have a really, really experienced crop of coaches that are working with players. I mean, we have Noelle Van Lodem, who is the new head of women's tennis. I mean,
She's
she's been
great. I love chatting with her. Yeah.
yeah, she's fantastic. I mean, she was top 50 for 10 years in her playing career. She's worked at the French Federation. She's worked at the LTA. Now she's with us. She's worked with countless top players. I mean, her brother was a top 50 ATP player. She's been immersed in high level tennis on the men's side and the women's side. And she's, you know, s- her daughter is even incredible. She's been doing super well on tour. And, I think that having her is such an asset for the fellow coaches like me and the aspiring, hopefully one day, top coaches in the country. I know I learned a ton from her. She also cares so much, so the players are really supported. I know that she gives so much of her time and energy, more than I think I can think of anybody would do, and her guidance is priceless, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this crop of new, teens coming through because she's just doing such a good job of taking care of everyone and making sure that they're supported. And we also have Natalie Toziat, who's, helped develop a lot of players, and she worked with Bianca and she worked with, um, uh, Jeannie Bouchard, and now she's working with Vicky and she's worked with Caroline Garcia. She was top 5 in the world herself. So we have a lot of really great coaches. There's a lot of depth on the coaching side, and because a lot of our coaches have made it as top players themselves, and also, on the men's side, there's Frank Dancevic, and we have a lot of great resources. I say that having that background and having that experience, it just tenfold helps players, be able to transition from juniors to pros because those those coaches get it. They've been there, they've lived it, they've had to do it over and over with different players. They know the process, they know what it takes when something happens, they don't panic, they know how to pivot, and it's just that kind of experience you can't really buy. So I would say that, if you look statistically, I don't have the numbers, but I know that Canada is, one of the biggest countries in terms of square footage, but we have a very small population. So based on the amount of junior players that we have in our country versus the conversion rate of how many players actually are in are converting and playing professional women's or men's tennis, I think it's pretty impressive compared to other nations with a bigger population. So I'm pretty proud of what we're doing. I think that Tennis Canada's really kind of got a good system going, and it shows.
It's an impressive list of coaches for sure, and just the resumes that all of you have collectively. I mean, it garners immediate respect, I would imagine, from players and their families that are choosing to align with Tennis Canada moving forward. Good point with the indoor courts and just the limited amount of access in Canada due to the weather. I'm super stoked for spring to finally be here so we can hit the outdoor courts. Um, Looking towards warmer weather a little bit, but are you keeping an eye on the sunshine double between what happened in Indian Wells and how things are progressing right now as we record in Miami as they hit the round of 32? Are you always keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening there?
Yeah, no, I am. I have to. I mean, especially with the Canadians that are in the draw, and just being a coach, you always have to take a look at what's happening and how people are playing, and there's always something you can learn. Um, and those are also, some of my favorite tournaments. I love competing in both. So being there and also watching the players that I know and were my colleagues for many years do so well and compete and play amazing. It's really fun. I enjoy watching it. Definitely have a little bit of FOMO, but it's nice to see that the Canadians are doing great and they've got a lot of screen time on TV, which makes my life a lot easier. I don't have to fish for it online. I can just turn on the TV and boom, someone's up there playing.
It's true. I mean, Felix has been off to a great start so far this year. Denis Shapovalov as well, kind of reinserting himself into the top 30 conversation. Looking forward to Bianca Andreescu coming back soon. I don't know if you've heard any news about how that's going for her at the moment. We've yet to see her play this year.
Yeah, she's not been competing yet, but she is training and she is rehabbing and I don't think there's been an official announcement of which event she's planning to come back and compete in, but fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later. I know that she's really been dealt a tough hand with injuries, but
Yeah.
she's just one of those people that somehow finds a way to come back and has great results whenever she does. So just fingers crossed that she stays healthy when she does come back.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's become an expert in the comebacks with all the injuries, but I still feel like she's a player that nobody out there is going to want to see next to their name in the draw, right?
Oh yeah, she's a dark horse. If she's not seeded, she's someone you pray not to have because I mean, I truly believe that when she's on and she has her, she finds her best level, she can beat anyone. I mean, I really think she has the potential to be number 1 in the world. We saw that. We saw her playing at the top of her game when she was a teenager. So, with the experience that she has, and the confidence that we know is in there somewhere whenever she's able to compete for an extended period of time. It's definitely possible. And if you really look at her age, I mean, she's young, right? She's still a baby. I mean, if she can stay healthy, she's got a lot of time ahead of her on the WTA tour.
Absolutely agree. Well, hey, look, Sharon, thank you so much for taking some time to join me today to catch up on, what you've been doing, and thank you on behalf of Canadian tennis fans for the impact you're having on our young players. And we look forward to having you on again and catching up on the development of your U14s and the other players that you mentioned as well today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. As always, it was a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.